The golden cage. The crystal chandeliers of Sterling Manor cast dancing shadows across the marble floors as Victoria Sterling stood before her bedroom mirror, her reflection showing a vision of reluctant beauty. At 22, she possessed an ethereal grace that had caught the attention of society's most eligible bachelors, yet today those emerald eyes held nothing but dread. "Stand straighter." "Darling," Eleanor Sterling commanded from behind her, adjusting the antique lace veil for the 5th time. Her mother's silver hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that matched her sharp features and sharper tongue. "Marcus Blackwell is one of the most powerful men in the country. You should be grateful." Victoria's fingers trembled as she touched the sapphire necklace at her throat, a wedding gift from her soon-to-be husband. The stones felt cold against her porcelain skin, much like everything else about this arrangement. "Mother, I barely know him. We've spoken perhaps 4 times. Love is a luxury we cannot afford," Eleanor replied curtly, smoothing down her charcoal dress. "Your father's shipping company is drowning in debt. This marriage will save Sterling Industries and secure your future with one of the wealthiest men in America." Through the tall windows, Victoria could see the gardens where she had painted watercolors as a child, where she had dreamed of romance and true love. Those innocent dreams now seemed like fantasies from another lifetime, buried beneath the weight of family duty and financial desperation. In the groom's suite across the estate, Marcus Blackwell adjusted his platinum cufflinks as he stared at his reflection. At 30, he commanded attention in any boardroom with his dark hair, piercing gray eyes, and the confidence of a man who had built Blackwell Technologies from nothing into a global empire worth billions. "Still time to call this off," his best friend and business partner, James Crawford, said as he handed Marcus a glass of champagne. "Though I have to admit, you're getting a stunning bride out of this deal." Marcus gazed out at the gathering crowd below, politicians, celebrities, tech moguls, and society's elite. Everyone who mattered was here to witness this strategic alliance. "It's not about calling it off, James. It's about expansion into European markets. Richard Sterling's shipping connections are exactly what Blackwell Technologies needs." And the girl. Marcus paused, remembering his brief encounters with Victoria. She had been polite but distant, speaking only when spoken to, her eyes always focused somewhere else. There was something mysterious about her that intrigued him, something vulnerable hiding beneath her composed exterior. "She's not what I expected," he admitted quietly. The processional music began, and 300 guests rose to their feet as Victoria appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm. Richard Sterling, once a proud shipping magnate, now looked aged beyond his 58 years. The stress of financial ruin was etched in the lines around his weathered face. Victoria walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes fixed on the elaborate altar rather than on the man waiting for her. Each step felt like walking toward a beautiful prison, golden bars that would cage her dreams forever. The guests murmured appreciatively at her beauty, but she heard none of it, lost in her own thoughts of the life she was leaving behind. Marcus watched her approach, struck by her grace despite the obvious tension in her delicate shoulders. When their eyes finally met, he saw fear flickering in those emerald depths, carefully masked, but unmistakable to someone who understood the art of reading people. The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows that felt anything but traditional to the bride and groom. Marcus's Manhattan penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a gleaming tower that pierced the city's skyline like a modern spear. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Central Park and the Hudson River, while priceless modern art adorned the walls of the spacious rooms. It was a testament to success and sophistication, yet to Victoria, it felt as cold and unwelcoming as a museum after hours. "Your suite is down this hallway," Marcus said, leading her past abstract sculptures that probably cost more than most people's homes. He opened the door to reveal a stunning guest bedroom, complete with its own sitting area, marble bathroom, and walk-in closet filled with designer clothes. "I had a stylist select some items based on your measurements. If anything doesn't fit or isn't to your taste, we can arrange for alterations." Victoria stepped into the room, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. Everything was perfect, elegant, and completely foreign to her simple tastes. The silk bedding was a shade of cream that probably had some French name she'd never heard of, and the fresh orchids on the nightstand looked like they'd been flown in from somewhere exotic. "It's beautiful," she managed to say, though the words felt hollow in her throat. "I thought you might appreciate the eastern exposure," Marcus continued, gesturing toward the windows. "The morning light is particularly nice for reading." He paused, studying her face for any sign of pleasure or approval, but Victoria's expression remained carefully neutral. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Well then," Marcus said, loosening his tie slightly, "I suppose we should discuss how this arrangement will work. I typically leave for the office around 7 and return by 8, unless there are evening meetings. Mrs. Chen, my housekeeper, manages the household staff. If you need anything, just ask her." Victoria nodded, feeling like an employee receiving orientation rather than a wife discussing her new home. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying. "I'll let you settle in," Marcus finally said, his voice carrying a note of disappointment that Victoria pretended not to notice. "Sleep well, Victoria." As the door closed behind him, Victoria sank onto the silk-covered bed and finally allowed the tears to fall. She was now Mrs. Marcus Blackwell, one of the wealthiest women in the country, living in a palace most people could only dream of. So why did she feel like she had lost everything that mattered? That night, Victoria sat at the antique writing desk by the window, the city lights twinkling below like fallen stars. She opened the leather-bound journal that had been her constant companion since childhood, a gift from her grandmother who had always encouraged her to capture her thoughts and dreams on paper. "Day 1 as Mrs. Blackwell," she wrote with trembling fingers. "I am married to a stranger who treats me with the same professional courtesy he probably shows his business associates. He is handsome, wealthy, and powerful. Everything a woman should want, according to Mother. But he doesn't know that I have never been kissed by a man, that the thought of physical intimacy terrifies me because Mother always said it was something women endure for the sake of family and duty. He doesn't know that I paint watercolors in secret because Mother says art is a waste of time for a proper wife. He doesn't know anything about who I really am beneath this designer gown and perfect makeup. How can I share a life with someone who doesn't know my soul?" The next morning brought their first attempt at domestic normalcy. Marcus knocked softly on her door and invited her to join him for breakfast. Victoria appeared in one of the elegant outfits he had provided, a pearl gray dress that highlighted her natural beauty but made her feel like she was wearing a costume. "Did you sleep well?" he asked politely as they sat at opposite ends of a dining table that could easily seat 12 people. "Yes, thank you," Victoria replied, though she had actually lain awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and wondering what her life had become. Marcus studied her over his morning coffee, noting the dark circles under her eyes that expertly applied makeup couldn't quite hide. "I have several meetings today, but I thought perhaps we could have dinner together tonight. Start getting to know each other properly." The suggestion was reasonable, even thoughtful, but Victoria felt panic flutter in her chest like a trapped bird. Getting to know each other meant opening up, sharing personal thoughts and feelings, and eventually leading to the physical intimacy that all married couples were expected to share. Day 28 of their marriage dawned gray and overcast, matching Marcus's increasingly frustrated mood. He had spent another sleepless night wondering if he had made the gravest mistake of his life. His business empire was thriving under his leadership, but his personal life felt like a carefully orchestrated disaster. That afternoon, while Victoria was visiting her father at his office to discuss some family business matters, Marcus found himself pacing the empty penthouse like a caged predator. He had tried everything he could think of to connect with his wife. Flowers, thoughtful gifts, patient conversation, but she remained as elusive as morning mist. The almost kiss from the previous evening haunted him. For a brief moment, he had seen something vulnerable and real in her emerald eyes, something that suggested she might actually want to bridge the gap between them. But then she had fled, leaving him more confused than ever. Frustrated and desperate for understanding, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He walked to Victoria's room, telling himself he just needed to comprehend what made her retreat from him night after night. The room was immaculate as always, but something caught his attention. In her haste to leave, Victoria had left her writing desk drawer slightly ajar. A corner of familiar leather peeked out from beneath some papers. Marcus hesitated for a long moment, his conscience warring with his desperate need for answers. Finally, his frustration won out, and he carefully retrieved the leather-bound journal. With trembling hands, Marcus opened the diary to the first entry and began to read. What he discovered in those pages shattered every assumption he had made about his wife and their marriage. Day 1 as Mrs. Blackwell. I am married to a stranger who treats me with professional courtesy. He doesn't know that I have never even held hands with a man before today. He doesn't know that the thought of physical intimacy terrifies me because Mother always said it was something women endure rather than enjoy. Marcus's heart clenched as he continued reading, each entry revealing more of Victoria's inner turmoil and the depth of her innocence. Day 7. Marcus brought me white roses today that smell like heaven. He asked about my interests, my dreams, and I wanted desperately to tell him about my paintings, about how I see colors and emotions in everything around me. But Mother's voice in my head reminds me that proper wives don't burden their husbands with such frivolous matters. Day 15. We danced at the gala tonight, and for a few moments I forgot to be afraid. In his arms I felt beautiful and wanted and safe. But then the music ended and reality returned. How can I tell him that I've never been kissed? That I don't know how to be the sophisticated woman he probably expected to marry? With each page, Marcus felt his anger transforming into something else entirely. This wasn't the rejection of a cold, unfeeling wife. This was the terrified response of an innocent young woman who had been taught to fear her own desires and doubt her own worth. Day 27. I almost let him kiss me today. When he knelt beside my chair and looked at me with such kindness, I felt things I've never experienced before. My heart raced, my skin felt warm, and for a moment I wanted nothing more than to close the distance between us. But then I remembered all of Mother's warnings about women who appear too eager or available. What if Marcus loses respect for me if I show how much I'm beginning to care for him? When Victoria returned from her father's office that evening, she found Marcus waiting for her in the living room. Her diary lay open on the coffee table between them, and her face went white as she realized what had happened. "You read it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had to know," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was going insane trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, how to reach you." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself protectively. "Now you know the truth. I'm not the sophisticated wife you deserved. I'm just a frightened girl playing dress-up in designer clothes." Marcus stood slowly, his gray eyes intense and filled with an emotion Victoria couldn't quite identify. "Do you know what I read in these pages?" Victoria shook her head, too humiliated to speak. "I read about a woman who sees beauty everywhere she looks, who captures emotions that most people can't even name in her art. I read about someone who cares so deeply about doing the right thing that she's willing to sacrifice her own happiness." Marcus stepped closer. "I read about a woman who has been taught to be ashamed of her own feelings, her own desires, her own incredible talents." "I don't know how to be what you need," Victoria said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be intimate. I don't know how to be a real wife." Marcus reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands. "Victoria, look at me." Reluctantly, she lifted her eyes to meet his. "I don't want you to be anything other than exactly who you are," Marcus said fiercely. "I don't want a sophisticated wife who knows all the right moves. I want the woman who paints flowers that seem to glow with inner light. I want the woman who blushes when I compliment her. I want the woman who has the courage to trust me with her fears. But I don't know anything about being intimate with a man," Victoria confessed, her voice breaking. "What if I disappoint you?" Marcus's smile was tender and patient. "Then we'll learn together. Victoria, there's no rush. There's no timeline we have to follow. This is our marriage, and we get to decide how it unfolds." "You don't understand," Victoria said desperately. "I've never even been properly kissed. I don't know how to please a man. I don't know what I'm supposed to do or feel or want." "Then let me teach you," Marcus said softly. "Not because you have to learn, but because you want to. When you're ready, if you're ready." Victoria studied his face, searching for signs of impatience or disappointment, but found only kindness and something that looked remarkably like love. "You would do that? You would be patient with someone so inexperienced?" "Victoria," Marcus said, his thumb gently wiping away her tears. "Your inexperience isn't a flaw to be overcome. It's a gift that you choose whether or not to share. If you choose to share it with me, I will treasure it, and you, more than you can imagine." "I'm scared," Victoria whispered, but she didn't pull away from his touch. "I know," Marcus said, "but you don't have to be scared of me. I would never hurt you or pressure you or make you feel ashamed of what you feel." Instead of answering with words, Victoria rose up on her tiptoes and brushed her lips against his in the briefest, most innocent of kisses. Marcus's eyes closed at the sweet contact, his heart racing with the trust she was showing him. When she started to pull away, he followed her movement, deepening the kiss just slightly, showing her how to move her lips with his, how to breathe through the connection, how to let herself feel the warmth and pleasure without fear. When they finally separated, Victoria's eyes were wide with wonder. "That was different than I expected. Good different or bad different?" Marcus asked, though her expression already told him the answer. "Very good different," Victoria admitted, her cheeks pink with a blush that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with awakening desire. 6 weeks after their wedding, Victoria made a decision that would complete their transformation from strangers to soulmates. She had been painting in the sunlit living room when Marcus came home from work, and instead of her usual polite greeting and quick retreat, she looked up at him with new confidence shining in her emerald eyes. "Marcus," she said, setting down her brush and wiping her hands on a paint-stained cloth, "I think I'm ready to be your real wife." Marcus felt his heart stop and then race. He loosened his tie and moved closer, studying her face carefully. "Are you certain? We don't have to rush anything, Victoria. I meant what I said about taking our time." Victoria stood and walked over to him, placing her hands on his chest where she could feel his heartbeat accelerating beneath the fine fabric of his shirt. "I've been thinking about what you said, about intimacy being something to look forward to rather than endure. I've been thinking about how patient and kind you've been, how you've never made me feel ashamed or pressured." She paused, gathering courage. "I've realized that I do look forward to it. I look forward to being close to you, to learning what it means to love someone completely." Marcus cupped her face in his hands, searching her eyes to make sure she was truly ready. "I love you, Victoria. Not because you're finally ready for this, but because of who you are, your courage, your talent, your beautiful heart." "I love you too," Victoria said, the words coming easily for the first time in her life. "Will you show me how to love you properly?" What followed was everything their wedding night should have been: tender, passionate, and full of discovery. Marcus kept his promise to make it beautiful for both of them, taking time to show Victoria that her body was capable of incredible pleasure, that her desires were not shameful but wonderful, that love between husband and wife was one of life's greatest gifts. Victoria discovered that intimacy was not the frightening duty her mother had described, but a joyful expression of the love that had grown between them. She learned that she was not broken or inadequate, but a passionate woman who had finally found a man worthy of her trust. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay entwined in Marcus's bed, their bed now, Victoria traced lazy patterns on his chest while he played with her auburn hair. "No regrets?" Marcus asked softly, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Only that we waited so long," Victoria admitted, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. "I was so afraid of disappointing you that I nearly ruined everything." "You could never disappoint me," Marcus assured her. "Your honesty, your vulnerability, it's made me fall deeper in love with you than I ever thought possible." 3 months later, Victoria stood before a mirror in their bedroom, adjusting the silk scarf around her neck as she prepared for her first solo art exhibition. The scared, repressed young woman who had married Marcus Blackwell out of duty was gone, replaced by a confident artist and beloved wife. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, straightening his tie as he prepared to escort her to the gallery opening. "A little," Victoria admitted, smoothing down her emerald dress. A color, Marcus said, brought out her eyes, but mostly excited. "I never imagined my paintings would hang in the Whitmore Gallery." "Your grandmother would be so proud," Marcus said, coming up behind her to fasten a necklace of emeralds and diamonds around her throat, his gift to celebrate her artistic debut. "I think she would," Victoria agreed, leaning back against his chest. "She always told me that the right person would love all of me, my art, my dreams, my fears, everything." "She was a very wise woman," Marcus murmured, kissing the side of her neck in a way that still made Victoria's pulse race after all these months. At the gallery that night, Victoria's paintings drew crowds of admirers and several offers from collectors. Critics praised her unique ability to capture emotion in watercolor, calling her work luminous and transcendent. But the moment that mattered most to her was when she spotted her mother in the crowd, looking stunned as she stared at a painting of the Sterling family garden. "It's beautiful." "Victoria," Eleanor said quietly when her daughter approached. "I never realized. I was wrong to discourage this." "It's never too late to support the people we love," Victoria replied gently, having long since forgiven her mother's misguided attempts at protection. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Marcus and Victoria stood together in front of her favorite painting, a portrait of two dancers moving together in perfect harmony, their faces glowing with love and trust. "No more separate rooms?" Marcus asked teasingly, remembering those first difficult weeks of their marriage. "No more separate rooms," Victoria confirmed, turning in his arms to face him. "No more walls between us. Just us, for the rest of our lives." When they kissed under the gallery lights, surrounded by the art that told the story of Victoria's journey from fear to love, both of them knew they had found something infinitely more valuable than the business arrangement that had brought them together. Epilogue. 2 years later, the sound of children's laughter would fill their penthouse as Victoria cradled their newborn son while watching their toddler daughter chase butterflies on the terrace garden Marcus had created for her. But for now, they had each other and the knowledge that the most beautiful love stories often begin with the most unlikely circumstances. Their marriage had started with duty and distance, but it had transformed into something passionate, beautiful, and eternal. The virgin bride who had feared her husband for weeks had become the beloved wife who would never spend another night apart from the man who had taught her that love was not something to endure, but something to celebrate every single day.